Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Nacho Tuesday. And today I have Bo here with Till CFO. And today we're going to be talking about how to communicate with investors and everything you need to know about that. So without further ado, we'd love if you could introduce us and what Till CFO does over there.
Hey Andy, thanks for having us. Glad to be on. So yeah, Till CFO is a fractional CFO firm. So like the way I like to explain it is every startup, if you think about it as a three-legged stool, there's three primary functions to a startup. You have the finance leg, the operations leg, and the sales leg. Very often, a startup will cover the sales and the operations really well, but the one that gets neglected the most in the earliest stages is the finance leg. So Till CFO is organized to be that third leg to provide a really strong foundation so that startups can really achieve the growth that they have as part of their business plan.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot with startups over the years. It's, really exciting to get new sales and bring in revenue, but if you're not managing your finances well, I mean, you kind of, kill the company with a death by a thousand cuts, so to speak. So, it's unfortunate, but a company that's financially managed well can, weather the storm and be able to build something actually incredible. But glad that they have your guys' company there to service them and there's those needs. How did you identify this problem? And I guess what got you to this point in your career?
Yeah, so I've been in multiple entrepreneurial finance type ventures, starting out in a hedge fund, then went overseas to Hong Kong, did private equity over there. Most recently, a business that we ran, my co-founder and I, is a commercial lending business. And so we would vet companies all across the country, thousands, hundreds and hundreds a year. And one of the things, and we were lending senior debt facilities to these businesses, and very often we would have to say no simply because they could not produce clean financials. And we knew that to go back to that three-legged stool analogy, we knew that they had a good pulse on their sales. They could sell what they were doing, and they could deliver what they were telling their customers they could sell, but they just could not produce quality financials. And as a non-bank lender, that was one of the key aspects of our underwriting criteria. So over that 6 years of building that business, which we subsequently sold to a bank, after selling that to the bank, we decided we're entrepreneurs, not bankers, and so we said, what's next? And we said, let's go tackle that problem of providing financial leadership to these types of businesses so that they can access the capital that they need, whether it's on the equity or the debt side.
Somebody's got to do it, Yeah, it's one of those most overlooked roles in a company. So I guess what were some of the common red flags that you would see in the financials that would turn you guys off from being able to lend to them?
Well, the very first one is they'd hand over what their tax accountant had prepared for them, and which is often in a cash basis. And when you're evaluating the performance of a business or the health of a business from a financial standpoint, you always want to look at accrual basis financials. So that was number one. Number two is timely information. We would ask them for their most recent financials, and they would be 3 months behind. And so that was another key issue.
Any other red flags in terms of like how they spent money or anything like that?
Yeah, whenever if we got to the point where we could get into the financials, being too frivolous on the things that didn't matter and not investing enough into the things that did matter was important. But more important than that, kind of the higher level strategy is knowing exactly why they were spending what. So having a disciplined budgeting process, measuring against that budget, being able to show and prove, like, here's what we decided to make bets on and invest in, and this is the ROI that was generated from that spend.
Yeah, especially those pesky marketers sometimes.
That was always an egregious bucket. Is no one could ever really prove. Marketing is such a hard thing to prove ROI, because good lead comes from. I'm sure you found that being in the marketing world.
Yeah, some aspects of it, yes, others not. I mean, people like, the direct click tracking and all that kind of stuff
Yeah,
too. But yeah, there's other things like sometimes events are harder to
right.
value, or like the importance of branding, for instance, and the effect it has on people. But tough to explain that to accountants. And there's a time and place for that sometimes for startups too, where and how to spend money on marketing appropriately.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people waste money there too. So, speaking of which, a lot of companies think that getting themselves out of spending debt is to raise money, and that raising money is just going to fix everything with their company. So, I guess why do you think most companies fail to raise money for their company?
Yeah,
Um,
a couple of reasons. One is not having a really clear vision for how they're going to spend and the use of that capital. So you want an integrated and comprehensive financial plan. Doesn't have to be complex. Like oftentimes complex models are worse than simple models, but that financial plan and exactly how you're going to use the capital has to be integrated with the vision that you have and the strategy that you have for your company. And being able to really clearly articulate and tie those things together, help an investor quickly understand that is a major reason why a success or failure on raising capital. I think another reason is just a lack of a disciplined process. What we oftentimes tell a lot of our clients is just treat it almost like a sales process. Create a simple Kanban board work that has different discrete stages that you're moving investors through, so you can track where each investor is at, because you may have dozen, 2 dozen, maybe even more than that conversations with different investor groups, and being able to know exactly where you left off with each one is important. Which goes to the third point, which I think is interesting. There was a study about a year ago that a VC firm did that measured the response time of a founder and tied that, and what they wanted to ask the question: does the responsiveness of a founder have any predictive ability in their success at raising a Series A? And what they found is that founders that respond twice as fast as were able to raise their Series A than the ones that failed at raising their Series A. So being responsive to investors shows and proves that you have the capacity, the organization, the discipline to be responsive to them, and they're going to correlate that to being able to be responsive to your customers.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that a lot of that comes down to having everything in order, being
Yeah,
organized before you even pitch them in the first place, right? Because an investor might ask you for specific documentation or financials, and if you're not able to produce those on the spot, that's going to take you time. Even if you want to get it to the investor, you're going to have to call somebody like Till CFO on a 24/7 helpline to try to get some help last minute, which unfortunately it usually doesn't work that way. So
yeah, yeah.
that
There's a lot of systems building as an entrepreneur that you have to do and put in place, and it's a challenging job because your time is split in so many different ways, and you could be spending. You want to spend your time on lots of different systems: sales, operations, finance. Like I mentioned, those three
yeah.
strategic stools. But when it comes to capital raising, having a really robust financial system, it can be simple. It doesn't have to be this full-blown complex system, but there does need to be a system and a process for how you manage kind of that financial back of the house.
Yeah, because if you check those boxes, when you go out to actually actively pitch, you're ready to respond quickly and effectively with, the answers to their questions. That's going to, like you said, lead to a much higher conversion rate there. The other aspect too that you kind of touched on earlier was the storytelling aspect. A lot
Yeah.
of times I think founders want to, talk about their features or the way they see their product, whereas the VC might want to understand more of the business model and how can this thing make money and why should the larger market care about it. So, in your view, why is storytelling so important for startups, and what tips would you recommend for them for how
Yeah.
to communicate that properly?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think people they naturally are drawn to stories. Like we're just hardwired for that reason. And I think being able to articulate the art of the story and then marrying that with the numbers and the science of your financial model and the ROI that the investor could expect. That's really the art of raising capital. And so I think some of the things that are important is being able to tell the story of what you have done, particularly earlier in some of the earlier rounds, so pre-seed, seed, even Series A. Investors are largely looking at the people that are part of a startup and the track record of the firm's primary principals, or the founders, the leadership team. And so being able to articulate the traction that your team has achieved, the milestones that you guys have hit, that's a key. One of the resources we use a lot for the art of storytelling is sometimes people are just not gifted at crafting the right just phrase or way to say something. And so we've often recommended, there's lots of firms out there, but one of our partners is a firm in Seattle that helps articulate and design pitch decks and investor presentations for startups. It's a firm called Best Foot, led by Shelby Burford. And so this firm, what they do is they distill kind of all of the components of your business and then consolidate it, make it really concise into an overarching story that you can present to your company, or sorry, to your investors. And we have used a firm, Best Foot, and we've recommended that firm to many of our clients, and I've seen great success with that.
That's great. You recommended a Seattle firm. I'm from Seattle originally, so I have to look those guys up and
yeah,
recommend them to other people as well too. Because I do come across a lot of founders and startup people on a regular basis, just want to build their own deck, but they're not good storytellers at all. So sometimes you bring in the professionals. They might see it from an outside perspective as well, which is sometimes better than what you think you know about your product. It's good to get a third party to actually actively look at it, and they'll see things. They'll see the value in your business in the eyes of other people, as opposed to what you think you want to be.
That's exactly right. I've often find with SaaS founders, they're often very technical and engineering mind. And so they sometimes can get bogged down in the details, which are details matter when you're coding and programming. And if you mess up details, you cause massive issues in your code base. But it does not translate well when you only have a half an hour to try to convey a lot of information to an investor. You really have to distill it down into kind of some of the really key, simple components of the story you're trying to tell.
Absolutely. So let's say you do raise money and you're successful there. Once you have a venture partner or an investor on board, you immediately have to start thinking about the next step, right? So how are you going to grow your business? How are you going to find more success and traction there? So eventually, at some point, your investor is going to want to cash out. So you're either looking at IPO or raising multiple follow-on rounds. So you really need to start thinking ahead. The moment you raise money, you're responsible for that. Yeah. And that's when the communication begins for the next round of investors, and including the ones that you've already brought on board. So what kind of tips would you recommend to kind of keep your investors in the loop and communicate with them effectively, so that, when the time comes when you need money further on down the line, they're, excited about the business. They're clearly tuned in to what you're doing and believe in taking the next steps to put in more money into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the assumptions in that question is that you have overcome the major challenge of getting them to trust you with their capital. And so you want to build on that trust. And the best way to build on that trust is clear and direct and frequent communication. So setting up a regular communication pattern, telling them what you're going to do, and then actually doing that. So what we often recommend is at a minimum a monthly cadence and that could be a simple email with some of the key highlights around, sales, engineering, operations, finance. But then on a quarterly basis, you'll want to have a more detailed interactive session. And so what we often recommend for our founders is at a minimum on a quarterly basis, making it it could be a Zoom call or it could be in person if all your investors are in one place. But doing a roundtable with you and your investors to be able to walk through the business, communicate, critical updates, and be open to any questions that they might have. That consistent, transparent interaction builds trust, and it allows them to know what they can help you with. Because, like you said, you're going to be constantly raising money. If they're not, maybe they're only a seed investor, but they're going to have connections, and they want you to succeed and raise your Series A because the incentives are aligned based on the capital stack and capitalization table. So they're going to have connections to the next round investors. And if you've destroyed your trust, the likelihood of getting those warm connections are really low. But if you've built trust, they're going to give you access to their top recommendations to the next round.
That's a great point. The other benefit too of consistent communication is that you're top of mind, because a lot of these people are probably managing, they probably have dozens, if not hundreds of companies that they've invested in.
Right.
So, being top of mind for them with consistent communication also allows them to help you, right? So a lot of these people, make a business on being very connected. So if they're thinking you top of mind, the next, potential venture partner they meet with, they're thinking your company, or maybe the next potential client of yours, they're thinking about your company and how to refer them back to your business. So keeping that consistent communication really allows you to tap into their network, because they're thinking about you top of mind. And, when the time comes, they're willing to recommend you to other people as well.
Yeah, they want to be helpful. But like you said, they're managing lots and lots of portfolio companies typically. And so being front of mind is key. I agree with that.
Definitely. And I guess, how do you communicate the bad news, right? Because,
Yeah.
not every startup, you always go through the bad times and the stormy weather, but how do you communicate this to investors, to keep that trust and not scare them off, but, let them know maybe what the next steps are that you're going to take?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that it's inevitable. So you do have to have a plan, and you have to recognize that it's a normal experience of a startup, founder experience. So what we often tell our clients, and what we also subscribe to, is using three kind of primary principles: communicating early, communicating direct and honestly, and then communicating proactively. So on early, you want to, as soon as bad news and you've kind of wrapped your mind around what the fact pattern is around the situation, you want to proactively reach out to your investors to let them know. A core principle is you should always speak honestly and truthfully, but you don't have to share everything. Everybody needs to know the truth, but not everybody needs to know all of the truth. So that's where some of the discernment comes into play, where you can be honest and truthful, but still withhold and reserve judgment, because you just simply might not know how the rest of the situation is going to pan out. But by being proactive and coming to them with truthful facts and a solution, saying, here's what happened, here's the fact pattern around it, and here's what we are planning to do about it, that instills confidence and trust in an investor. And it could actually build trust even more than if you're just cruising through good times. Because if you go through a series of probably 4 or 5 quarterly updates where it's all good news, if a shrewd investor is paying attention, they know that something is a wash, because that never happens. Like, it's just not the reality of startup world. There's always challenges. There's always things that didn't go according to plan. And so this goes back to the topic we were just talking about, is you want to create a trusting relationship with your investors. And this presents having bad news to deliver is always uncomfortable and unpleasant, but it creates an opportunity to really build trust if you handle it appropriately.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think, a lot of founders just want to, like the turtle scenario, they want to stick their, or I guess an ostrich, you want to stick your head in the sand, but the predators are still out there. The problem still exists for your business. So the best way to communicate that is to identify the problem, and then, of course, give them actionable steps for what you're going to do to mitigate the issue or overcome it. And then, if you follow up with an investor, an investor follow up, but a month, 2 months later, having shown that you've solved that problem and overcame it, that's going to build even more trust, like you mentioned, with that investor, that this team can tackle any challenge and overcome it. So when the next challenge comes around, they have more trust in you and your ability to be able to execute upon it.
Yeah, you got it. That's exactly right.
Great. Any other fundraising tips you would recommend for startups? Like anything else that just investors are really looking for today, or that might excite them to want to participate in your company?
I mean, if you can always call yourself an AI company, that's
Buzzword.
yeah.
It actually works, but I mean, I hate the buzzword thing, but it does raise money.
Again, if you are going to do that, you better have a clear native vision for embedding AI, because that goes back to, I say that tongue in cheek, because I feel like every company we look at right now is in some way adjacently connected to AI. But that does, I mean, it presents an interesting topic of conversation, because with something like that, and representing yourself as a certain company, you do have to make good on that. Like what the phrase we always say is, you have to be able to cash the checks that you write. And so in other words, you have to be able to back up what you tell your investors in those pitch meetings. And so if your tech stack and your technology you're developing, your software isn't truly AI native, then it's probably best not to call yourself an AI company.
That's just a wrapper in some cases.
Yeah,
that's a good point too. I mean, I think where a lot of the investment opportunity is, putting yourself in an investor's shoes, is new technology trends, right? So AI unlocks amazing new benefits for new business models, and if applied appropriately, can be very disruptive and create these new exciting business models, which lead to a lot of potential to make money and generate returns for the investor. So AI, obviously, there's a lot of money to be made there because of the efficiencies created by AI. But the difference is knowing if you're a feature or a business. Does AI as a tool unlock a new business model, a better way of doing things that couldn't be done before without AI? Or are you just a wrapper with using AI as a feature, and you're an AI feature masquerading as a company?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so a lot of investors look out for that too. So just as you're building your company, think through the process and how you utilize some of these new technologies. Are you creating something new and necessary, or are you just doing the wrapper approach there? So I guess, how else do you see technology playing into investment and investor communications? Do you guys have some tools for this?
Yeah, I'll speak to it specifically from the finance angle, since financials are such a critical component of a diligence process. I think having a technology stack where you can have your financial data readily available, there's ways to do that, where you have integrations of your core payroll software, whether that's Gusto or Rippling or whatever it might be, into QuickBooks or Xero. Maybe you're using Ramp on the expense side, but being able to connect all those in to your general ledger. But then the key is being able to extract all that data out in clear ways to do that. We use a technology called LiveFlow. LiveFlow pulls the data out of QuickBooks and puts it into manipulable formats in Excel or Google Sheets, and also creates some dashboarding that we can use and just create a quick link to be able to send to an investor on behalf of a client. It's unfortunately kind of cost prohibitive to a startup, but working with firms like Till, we bear that cost, and then and make it available to our clients. So that's one that I would say is, from a financial perspective, just being able to have your numbers at your fingertips. Again, it goes back to being very responsive. Founders that are more responsive have been proven to show that they can raise capital. So having your numbers ready to go is important.
What about like for document storage or investor communications? I mean, there's some hacky ways to do it, of course. Good old Google Drive or just having like a HubSpot set up to send out the newsletters. But anything else you'd
Yeah,
recommend?
it depends on what stage you're at. If you're pre-seed seed, I think quick and dirty is fine. Google Drive is great. We have seen a lot of business plans in Notion documents, which
Yep.
that's an interesting way to do it because you can hyperlink to different components and let investors kind of follow their curiosity to different aspects of the business while keeping the main corpus of the business plan clear and simple. As you progress, I mean, DocSend from Dropbox is
Yep.
effective. You're able to do a lot of tracking around the data room and what files have been accessed when. You can actually even see how much time investors spend on a deck. Interestingly, ironically, even though it is important to have a really sharp professional deck, you can assume that investors probably going to spend less than 2 minutes on your deck.
Yep.
And you can see the data that DocSend puts out every year based on that. So those are some tools, but I think being frugal and entrepreneurial, kind of quick and dirty, is better on the earlier stages with that.
Yeah, definitely. You got to capture their attention early, and communicate it with simplicity in that deck too. And I want to mention a lot of those tools are in our marketplace. So DocSend, I think we have 90% off or something. So
Yeah.
for anybody looking for great software tools to manage this stuff, we do have big discounts on it. So I guess what's one thing you'd want potential customers to know about Till CFO, and why should they pick up your service today? I could already think of a few examples, but
I'm curious, what would you say?
well, I think because these early stage companies, most importantly, a lot of them do skip finance. And like we talked about during this interview, I think if you don't have your books in order and your documents and everything organized, you're not going to be able to raise money and get to the next level. So I think being able to think, since business is all about it's a financially driven machine, you should be thinking about finance as one of the most important core functions of the business from day one. And that might not be the sexiest work per se, but it's a necessary evil. And sometimes you're either not an expert at doing it,
Yeah.
but you might as well get the experts. And it sounds like you guys kind of have some programs in place for those companies that might be thinking about skipping on finance and maybe investing in growth, to maybe actually want to check that finance box, because it's going to be a lot better for their company as they grow going forward.
Yeah, that's well said. And I would add that we try as best as we can to serve our clients in such a way that finance does empower growth and generate value creation. We're business builders. We've been at part of startups and on multiple different multiple angles. We've been investors in startups. We've started startups. We've software company, hedge fund. We've lent money on the debt side. We've invested money on the equity side. We've sat on boards of startups. So our team has a comprehensive view of really what a founder's demands are. And so we distill all that wisdom and focus it in on being that third leg of the stool that that analogy I used of the finance department. Because honestly, it's challenging to try to pay for leadership in all three of those core areas. You have to have somebody selling the business. There's no founder, no other role other than the founder in an early stage that can sell the business. On the operations side, you generally have to, for SaaS companies, you generally have to have a really solid CTO or engineer, head of product that is developing what you are actually selling. And so if you look at the three, oftentimes that finance function, it's challenging to try to meet the demands of knowing you need the financial leadership, but not being able to afford that. Yeah. And so we believe in that. That's why we have organized Till CFO as a fractional offering is a suitable way to get you the best bang for your buck in that finance department.
Definitely. Yeah. And most importantly, I think, with your operating experience, you understand, having been a founder yourself, also being on the venture side, they're looking for, what it's like to be a founder, and, what the best approach to kind of get to that next level. So you've kind of been through it there. So who better position to actually help these companies at that early stage get to their next level?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. So I guess where can people learn more about Till CFO and pick up your guys' services today?
Yeah, our website's tillcfo.com, TILLCFO.com. And then you can find me on LinkedIn and be happy to connect there.
Excellent. Well, Bo, it's been great working with you guys. We did a fun event out at SF and LA Tech Week. It was great to work with your staff there. We look forward to a great continued partnership. You could also pick up Till CFO in the NachoNacho B2B SaaS and services marketplace. We have the best partners, and that makes us the best place to shop for this kind of stuff. So once again, Bo, thanks for coming on today, and we look forward to our continued partnership.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.